Good afternoon, Garland Nixon here, and Seymour Hersh has put out a bombshell article implicating Biden and the neocons on blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline. Should you believe it? Where did it come from? What's in it? Let's talk. Hello, and this is kind of horrifying but exciting. I'm going to show you the Substack. I'm not going to read it to you because I don't think it would be fair to Seymour Hersh. How America Took Out the Nord Stream Pipeline. The New York Times calls it a mystery, but the United States executed a covert operation that was kept secret until now. And as you can see, it's a long article. Look down it. I just have one thing highlighted. If he says a source with direct knowledge of the operational planning. So it's a long article. I commend you to go read it as soon as possible, but not until we talk. Let's start here. Should you believe it or not? That's up to you. It's up to you whether you believe it. I believe it, and I will tell you why. I mean, the first thing I sent it to some friends, and I had someone say, "I don't believe it." Okay. I believe it, and I'll tell you why I believe it for a number of reasons. And again, one of the things that I try to do oftentimes when I'm trying to evaluate things is revert to my time in law enforcement, right? And as I've said a million times, this was kind of my field. I was the commander of the investigations division at one time. I taught people how to do investigations, and one of the fields I learned and understand was called statement analysis. And you look into things. Do you believe it? What are people's state of mind, etc.? Right? Let's start here. Do I believe it? Who does it come from? Seymour Hersh. Seymour Hersh is a highly respected investigative journalist this guy broke the My Lai massacre, right? The stories that this guy have broken in the past have been major stories. And let me add this. This is a detailed and intricate story about the United States government doing something that is absolutely world-changing, right? Hersh's history tells us that we can't find an instance where he broke a major story like this, that it was wrong. Let's start here. He broke a major story. Can you show me an instance where Seymour Hersh broke a major story in detail and he was wrong? I know of none. So if we start with Seymour Hersh, should we believe it? If we start with who wrote it tells us that the author is extremely credible. It is plausible that this guy is telling the truth, that his stories are correct. A couple of other things. It's intricately detailed. If you study statement analysis, one of the things you'll find about lies are they tend to be broad. Lies tend not to be very detailed, because detail is something, if you're telling the truth, you remember every detail. Someone says, "Where were you?" "I was here." "Really? Tell me what happened," right? If it's true, you can tell somebody what happened. Where were you when the murder happened? "I was at my buddy's house." "What were you doing?" You got to think. Watching TV. "What were you watching?" "A movie," right? If it's true, "Where were you?" "I was at my brother's house." "What were you doing?" "We were watching a movie." "What movie?" "Napoleon Dynamite." "Tell me about that day." "I went over there. We did this. I went that." You're going to go into intricate detail. Why? Because it's true. And you can tell everything that happened. What happened while I was over there? "Well, I got up over the couch. I stubbed my toe. Somebody had left a safety pin on the floor, poked my finger was bleeding. My toenail was bleeding," right? Detail, not always, but it indicates that what a person's saying is more than likely true. So the level of intricate detail, you may not believe it. It implies to me it's more likely true than not true, right? Let's not forget, the man has a history of what? Of very, very, very deep throats, shall we say, very deep contacts in the Pentagon leaking things to him. He has a history of that. So he's a very credible person who has broken big stories before. There is not an instance where you can say that he broke a major story and that it was false. And he has a history of very, very close ties and very, very accurate contacts in the Pentagon. Those things say to Garland Nixon, this thing's probably more likely true than not. So here's what I'm going to say. You don't have to believe it. I do believe it. Now, let's go on. One of the reasons I believe it is because of where I think it came from. I believe it came from the Pentagon. And that even makes it even more credible that Seymour Hersh, he would be their guy. If you're in the Pentagon and you want to get this out, where are you going to go? Seymour Hersh is one of the most credible people in the world that you can find. If you're a Pentagon leaker, the Pentagon has a history of communications with this guy. It makes sense to me. So I believe it. Now let's move forward. And I'm going to talk about some of the things that I saw. I'm not going to read it. You should read this story, but I'm not going to read it because I think it would be unfair to him. People need to go there. Let me also say this. Before we go any further, let me give you the White House's reactions. The White House on Wednesday dismissed and here's what Reuters calls it, a blog post by a U.S. investigative journalist alleging the United States was behind explosions of the Nord Stream gas pipeline as utterly false and complete fiction. Reuters, it says Reuters has not corroborated the report, and it said, which said that an attack was carried out last September at the direction of Joe Biden. That's important, right? This is utterly false and complete fiction. I'm sorry, but I'm getting a call, and I'm going to have to call that person back. Okay, let's go. Let's talk about what I found. Let's talk about my notes, and let's go. Number one, here's what I think is very important. In two different instances, Seymour Hersh writes this: a source with direct knowledge. Here's another place he writes it: a source with the direct knowledge of operational planning. He's actually talking about how the attack was planned. And he says, according to a source, I'm going to have to call this person back. I'm sorry about that. It's an important call, but I'm going to move forward. It is an important call, but I have to call it back. Okay. So the fact that he says, according to a source with direct knowledge of operational planning, indicates that I think, could be wrong, I think it's somebody in the military. If in fact this thing is true, which I think it is, not saying that it is, I'm saying it seems to me that that's my opinion that it's true. That is that that would be somebody in the Pentagon. And it makes sense to me because basically the names that are put out there to be involved: Biden, Blinken, Newland, and Sullivan. This is the State Department core. This is the core of the State Department neocons. And the last thing this person says is the flaw was the decision to do it. They go on to say, it was a brilliantly planned operation. The flaw was the decision to do it. So it sounds to me, this is my guess, my speculation, that somebody in the Pentagon didn't like it and said, it's a brilliant plan, but God knows this is a stupid thing. I can't believe you're doing it. And in light of what's been happening lately with the escalations by the neocons in the State Department, with seeing the German military, some high-ranking former German military people come out and push back against this escalation, it appears to me that there are people in the military sphere in the West who are very unhappy with this, who are extremely angry at the decisions being made and the leadership that has been taken by the Sullivan, Newland, Biden clan. And I think this is a pushback. Let's continue to see what else we said. They said the planning started 2021 to early 2022, which means that prior to the invasion, the special military option, whatever, prior to the Ukrainian conflict, that the training, the planning for destroying the Nord Stream 2 pipeline started. So the Biden administration, according to this, was talking to the Germans. They were talking amongst themselves, and they decided we got to blow it. They showed total and utter disrespect for the Germans, and they showed a ruthlessness that, quite frankly, is stunning and remarkable. It tells you who these people are. Absolutely ruthless. They launched according to this, a violent military attack on a so-called ally, which tells you what they think of Germany. They could care less. And here's the other thing I think. I don't think it's inconsequential that very, very recently, Victoria Nuland went before Congress and bragged about it and talked about how great it was and what a wonderful thing. She literally bragged about this. I believe that might have been one of the straws that broke the camel's back, that infuriated the people at the Pentagon, to say, we got to do something. These people are out of their friggin' mind. And we can see they were unhappy. Let's go on to see some other things, some highlights that I took out of it. They used only the Navy. And the reason they did was so they could wouldn't have as many leaks, and they could get around Congress. So that tells you that they were literally saying, look, we don't want Congress to know that here's the bottom line, that the neocons see themselves as the crown. They see themselves as the king. They see themselves as the court. Congress, we don't have to. How can we launch a military attack on an ally and not tell Congress about it? That shows you all you need to know about Congress. The Congress doesn't exist. Congress does what they're told, and they know it. And they knew that if Congress found out, they weren't going to do anything about it. We know all Congress is going to do now, if this comes out, Congress is going to join in the chorus and say, well, this is crazy. It's lies. This is Russian propaganda, etc. Right? They know they did this to get around Congress, but it doesn't matter, because even if Congress finds out, they know Congress is completely under the control of the neocons, and Congress is in favor of this. If they told Congress would say, yeah, let's go. But they didn't want the leaks out, and they were afraid somebody in Congress might run their yap. Let's go on. In this article, they implicate Biden, Blinken, Nuland, and Sullivan as the center of this. They indicate that Ted Cruz was in favor of it, but they implicate that neocon cabal as being at the center of this thing. That tells me whoever it is probably doesn't like these people, doesn't like their decision. They say at the end they don't like the decision making of it. That whoever says it was a beautifully planned operation, it was wonderfully done, but it was a big mistake to do this. And in this article, somewhere in it, it also mentions, look, we don't think that what is it? It says it was a well-planned article. It says that it was a bad decision to do it. And I mean, they just, they say there was pushback. They say that this is interesting. One of the things that they mention is that one of the issues that they had with Nord Stream 2 was they saw it as a threat to Western dominance. Over whom? Over Europe. They looked at Nord Stream 2 and they said, my God, Europe is going to get a lot more cheap energy. Now, what happens if Europe gets more cheap energy? That means that their industry will be stronger. That means that their economics will be stronger. And that means that they won't have to listen to the US as much. It also mentions in here that Germany and France had been talking about more sovereignty and independence. This was a military assault on Germany and on Europe as a whole to say, look, they won't listen to us anymore. We're telling them to stop. This was gangster politics. This was the mafia. We told you to stop. We told you we're in charge, and you don't want to listen. We will launch a kinetic physical attack against you. If you won't listen to us, we will launch a physical attack to ensure compliance. This was war. You think about it. It's far worse than what they said Russia would do. They said Russia would cut your gas off or cut your gas on. They claimed that. There's no certainly evidence to prove that. But what the US did was said, we won't cut you off or cut you on. we will launch a military attack against you if you refuse to comply with what we said. They treated them like they treated Iraq, like they treated Libya, like they treat any other country. You do what we say or we'll kill you. These people are thugs. I've said this over and over. They're knuckle dragging apes. They're thugs. Okay. Let me just make sure. Okay. Let's continue. Sullivan pushed it with direct order from Biden. I'm looking at the notes that I had. Very important. Very important. One of the things this says is that basically they had meetings. In the meetings, there was the Navy, there was the Air Force, and there was a CIA. So the Pentagon leaders were in the meetings, and that Sullivan came and said, "We're doing this, and it's orders from Biden." This is Joe Biden. This is the same Joe Biden that said the problem with Donald Trump is his relationship with our allies, that I'm here to fix our relationship with our allies. Trump screwed up our relationship. I'm going to renew our relationship with our allies. And he's a knuckle dragging thug. He is a gorilla, as the mafia used to say. So he said to our allies, you will comply or I'll kill you. Basically, that's what I'll kill your economy. And he took out their economy. That this was not people underneath of Biden. This was not the neocons under Biden saying, what do you think we should do? This was not, a lot of people say Newland runs this. Newland's a neocon. Well, now we see the truth. Biden is a pure neocon and a vicious, violent one. And he is a crime boss. And now he said to Europe, not just Germany. When you read this article, it wasn't just about Germany. It was, they saw that the Europe's access to cheap Russian energy as a challenge to Western dominance over all of Europe. And they weren't having it. So they attacked Europe. And Biden was the one who said, we're doing this. And he said to Sullivan, we're doing it. It wasn't Newland. It wasn't Sullivan. Certainly they'd be in favor of it, but Biden was the man, according to this. Let's continue. They said, we have to be very, very careful because it's an act of war. Think about that. In their meetings, in their discussions about what they were doing, they said, look, we're going to commit an act of war against Germany. We're going to war with Germany. We're going to attack Germany. It's an act of war. I know it's an act of war. You know it's an act of war. We all know it's an act of war. But we got to be careful because we don't want people to know it. Now, again, think about who put this out. Whoever put this out is spilling the beans, man. We'll talk about that later. Spilling the beans. And we keep reading people who with a direct knowledge, it says, source with direct knowledge of operational planning, source with direct knowledge. So, I mean, we're talking about Cy Hersh. Cy Hersh says this source had direct knowledge. Here's what I'm telling you. Somebody was sitting in a room. They were sitting in the room. They were part of the conversation, or they knew it. Either they were part of the conversation and sitting in the room, or whoever was part of the conversation and sitting in the room came and met with them and told them. This was not some deep throat individual leak in the Pentagon, which I think it was, or wherever it was. These were a group of people, in my opinion, who came together, who discussed this, who saw this as so outrageous, they said, we got to do something. And I believe that one of the triggering factors, a couple of the triggering factors were Victoria Nuland going before Congress and bragging about it, and the constant escalation by the neocons, and the understanding that these people are out of control and they're escalating this thing in a way that's irresponsible, and they won't listen to the military, they won't listen to us, we have no more input, and they're dangerous. That conversation was going in there because what they did was not small potatoes. They let the cat out of the bag on the president of the United States. Let's continue. Apparently, they're saying there are people in the CIA and the State Department that were detractors. There were people in there that were saying, we don't think this is a good idea. We should not do this. Bad move. Let's don't do it. If you read it, and they say some people were saying, if it gets out, if this thing gets out, it's too big. We can't do it. And apparently, let me look. They talk about it. It says, let me find it. Listen to this. What became clear to participants, according to the source with direct knowledge of the process, is that Sullivan intended for the group to come up with a plan for the destruction of two Nord Stream pipelines, and that he was delivering on the desires of the president. That President Joe Biden, according to this, said, blow it up. And Sullivan said, sir, yes, sir, I'm down with it. Right? The CIA argued that whatever was done, it would have to be covert. Everyone involved understood the stakes. This is not kiddie stuff, the source said. If the attack were traceable to the United States, it's an act of war. And you notice something. He keeps referring to the source. Cy Hersh keeps referring to who we're talking about. We're not talking about Garland Nixon. We're not talking about some schmuck on YouTube. We're talking about Cy Hersh. And Cy Hersh has a long history of connections and sources in the Pentagon. And he says the source said that they sat in a meeting and said, we are committing an act of war against Germany. Somebody says, I can't find the article. SeymourHersh.substack.com. There you go. SeymourHersh.substack.com. All right. A couple other things, I think. They talk about some other things. They also tie it to comments that were made. And they say that basically in early 2022, the CIA working group said, we have a way to blow it up. And they said on February 7th, 3 weeks before the Russian invasion, Biden met with his House staff with Olaf Scholz. And at a press briefing said, if Russia invades, there will no longer be a Nord Stream 2. We will bring it into it, right? So apparently, several of those involved in the planning were dismayed by what they viewed as an indirect reference to the attack. So think about it. They sit down and they're like, look, man, if we're going to do this, we better be quiet about it. We better keep our mouths shut. This is war with Germany. And Biden goes out and blabs, yep, if you, whatever, will blow the damn thing up, it's done, it's finished. Right? He goes out and admits it. Why? Because neocons don't care. That's the arrogance and hubris. And it says, this is the response. It was like putting an atom bomb on the ground in Tokyo and telling the Japanese that we're going to detonate it, it said. The source said the plan was for the options to be executed post-invasion and not advertised publicly. Biden simply didn't get it or ignored it. Biden's and Nuland's indiscretion, if that's what it was, might have frustrated some of the planners, right? So they go on. So you go on, and then they talk about the operation, and they say the Norwegians were involved. The Norwegians were intricately involved in a war, in an attack on Germany. The Norwegians worked with the U.S. to attack Germany. The Norwegian Navy, and they talk about all the details, every single detail. When you look at this, the level of detail is stunning in this article. Read the level of detail is absolutely stunning. Let me tell you something. I was an investigator. I was a cop. I'm going to tell you right now. There ain't no way in hell anybody writes something with this level of detail, and it ain't true. In my opinion, and it ain't true. You interview somebody, and when they give you this level of detail, this damn thing's true. That's what I believe, right? So they go on everything about this thing, right? That it says they basically they were kind of hiding it from Denmark and Sweden. They go on to say they go on also to say that initially the plan was to put some explosive on the pipeline and then to set a timer to blow up in 48 hours. But the plan was changed. And how the plan was changed was they said, look, no. Biden wants it done on his command. So they had to come up with another way. Think about this. On his command. Biden wanted to be the one. He wanted the power. He wanted the authority to say, blow it. And when they blow it, it was blown. Now, let me add this. Something when you corroborate evidence. Let's bring evidence together. Again, let's do investigations. Something else happened. a while back, maybe a couple weeks ago, there was something released. I believe it was, this is the way I understand it, that it came out that apparently the Russians had hacked into Liz Truss's phone, and they picked up a text from her that as soon as the Nord Stream was blown, that she texted Blinken and said, "It's done. It's done." And people said, wow, so they were involved, so that whatever the case may be, the Brits were involved, who was involved. Interesting. I don't know how that fits in here, but it's interesting. But again, it implies that there was a plan and the US was involved. Okay. So they go on to talk about the fallout. They talk about Blinken describing it as a potential good thing. And then they go on, and I think this is what pissed some people off at the Pentagon, if I'm right. More recently, Victoria Nuland expressed satisfaction at the demise of the newest of the pipelines. Testifying at a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing in late January, she told Senator Ted Cruz, "Like you, I am, and I think the administration is, very gratified to know that Nord Stream 2 is now, as you like to say it, a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea." And this is the end. It was a beautiful cover story, he went on. Behind it was a covert operation that placed experts in the field and equipment that operated on a covert signal. Last sentence. The only flaw was the decision to do it. So whoever this person is at the end says they did a hell of a job here. They had a great plan here. I can respect what they did and how they do. I can respect the way they did it, the methods that they used, the methodologies that they used, the planning that they did. Everything is brilliant except one thing. The dumbasses did it. They did it. So whoever did this, whoever went to him was pissed. They weren't happy. And here's the thing I pick up. One of the last things they write is about Victoria Nuland. One of the last things in this article is Victoria Nuland went to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and said, yeah, we're happy. We're great. We're through it. And that leads me to believe, that two things. When Biden went out and said, we're going to do it, it pissed them off, because one of the things they felt was it has to be covert. Remember, they said it is important that this thing is done covertly. We need plausible deniability because it's an act of war. They knew it was important. When Biden went out and ran his yap, what did they say in this story? They said, well, apparently either one of two things. Either Biden didn't get it, that it needed to be a covert, or he didn't give a damn about it. He just said, screw it. Hubris, imperial hubris, right? But again, they end up by saying the flaw was the decision to do it. So what we have here is a very powerful article, SeymourHersh.substack.com, How America Took Out the Nord Stream Pipeline. The New York Times calls it a mystery. And here's what he says. There's no ambiguity here, but the United States executed a covert sea operation that was kept secret until now. Now, I just did a video last night, and I talked about Nord Stream 2, and it's interesting, serendipitous, shall we say, because I was talking about how the Neocons are destroying the U.S. empire, right? And I had to bring up Nord Stream 2 for this reason. I believe that in the annals of history, if we make it, hopefully we'll make it, I think we will, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when people look at the relationship between the United States and Germany, between the United States and Europe, when people look at the dynamics surrounding this Ukrainian conflict, that one of the big discussions will be Nord Stream 2. Because as I said last night, as I've said many times, that the United States blew up Nord Stream 2 is not the elephant in the room. It's the blue whale in a phone booth. There's no room for you to move. It's in there. It takes up all the room. It sucks up all the room. There's no place to move around it. You can't even pretend that it's not true. Let's not forget, I think the guy's name is Radikov Sikorski. Let's add one more thing. A prominent neocon, a guy who is married to the Washington Post's neocon writer, Ann Applebaum. Immediately after it happened, he tweeted, "Thanks USA." Right? So the people involved, the CIA, the Pentagon, are saying, we got to be covert, man. We got to keep this quiet. This is an act of war. Now, what do we know? Now we know that the neocons were rattling around behind the scenes telling Sikorsky, hey, guess what we're going to do? Hey, big news. So in Neoconville, while the people involved, the CIA, the Pentagon, were doing everything to keep mums the word, Sullivan, Blinken, Biden, and those idiots were out running out telling every neocon they could, hey, big news, guess what we're going to do? Blow the Nord Stream pipeline. Yes. Yeah. Tell everybody, hey, do you have it on do you have it on our on our YouTube? Let's make a YouTube video about how we're going to do it. Let's put it out on Twitter. Let's tell everybody we're going to have we blew the Nord Stream 2 party. Be at the White House today at 6 p.m. While the military and the intelligence agencies were keeping mums the word, Biden and Blinken and Sullivan weren't, because as I said, it is the nature of serial killers to want to be caught because they are so proud of their work. They want people to know how brilliant they are, how they stalked their victims, how they do all the things that they did, the careful preparation for their victims and for their murders and how they got away with it. It is the nature of these neocons. The problem with Biden, again, imperial hubris, Biden and Blinken and these people, right, is they are drunk with power. So what they want to say to the world is, look what we did to Germany. Man, we're powerful. We can do anything we want to anybody at any time. We are not bound by the Constitution. We are not bound by Congress. We are not bound by any political or legal oversight or constitutional oversight. We're not bound by any of that. We can do whatever we want and we can brag about it. We can stand out on a corner in the middle of the afternoon and scream, yeah, we committed an act of war against Russia. What you going to do about it? I mean, against Germany. What are you going to do about it, Germany? Nothing. There's nothing you're going to do about it. So they were calling all their friends. Clearly, how did this guy, Sikorsky, know that U.S. did it? He didn't say, hey, I think the U.S. might have did it. He literally tweeted a picture of the explosion site and tweeted over that on Twitter. Billions of people on Twitter. Hundreds of millions, if not billions on Twitter. And this guy tweets, thanks, USA. And you notice Biden and his neocons didn't say, hey, we didn't do it. Hey, instead, they started going out bragging. Blinken, yeah, it's a wonderful thing. And man, I'm sure glad that was blown. Ooh, we got that out of the way. Now I can go have some lunch. Newlands in front of the Senate Foreign Intelligence Committee. Yeah, good old Nord Stream pipelines blown to hell. Hey, wonder who could have did that. I wonder. I don't know. What do you think, Ted Cruz? Me neither. I don't know. Hey, it happened. Things happen, Boy, we sure are powerful, aren't we? Nobody can do anything. No one in the entire world could do anything to stop us. Except we have a little trouble with balloons. If you got balloons, we might have problems. But other than that, screw you. You can't touch us. It is the imperial hubris. It is the entitled belief of the narcissist and the psychopath that says, I have committed a violation of the law, and now I must take credit, not responsibility, credit for my powerful act. They couldn't live with themselves if they didn't brag about it. They couldn't just do it and walk away with their hands in their pocket. It would be like throwing a rock down the well, as we say in Zen. It would be like throwing a rock down a well and not hearing a splash. Now, here's what's interesting about this. They have let me add this. Here's something important before I move on to the dynamics inside the Biden administration. Germany now. I have joked and laughed in the past in all seriousness, though, but I used humor to get my point across about the humiliation and degradation that Biden visited upon Olaf Scholz and various and sundry members of the German government, right? He has humiliated and degraded them in a way that no human being should ever have to face. It is sad. You hang your head in shame. When I see Olaf Scholz, I don't have to. I feel I don't hate him. I'm not angry at him. I hang my head in shame as a man that any man would be emasculated to the level that he has been, makes me feel ashamed of myself. Not just him. I look at him, I'm like, oh my God, what happened to this man is just, it is an embarrassment to humankind that someone should be treated like Olaf Scholz has been treated, right? So I bring that up because I personally feel bad to see what's happened to him. But this makes it exponentially worse. And here's why. Because now Seymour Hersh has let the cat out of the bag, and there is nothing, even now, nothing that Olaf Scholz can do. Joe Biden brought him out in front of the world in a press conference and said to him, we will blow your damn pipeline up and ain't nothing you can do about it. And he blew the pipeline up. And now somebody has leaked, hey, he blew your pipeline up. And you know what the Green Party and Olaf Scholz, you know what they're going to do? They are going to do nothing because they are powerless. Number one, because they're powerless. But number two, because what is being exposed here is something very simple. Who they work for. You see, if the German government worked for the Germans, it would be incumbent upon them to act on behalf of the Germans. They would have to confront the Biden administration. They would have to confront this issue in public. They would have to say, look, this is a problem. We need an answer right now. Well, you don't need an answer. You know, they would have to say to the Biden administration, we demand, as they say, reparative justice. You have done this to us. Number one, you owe us for the damn pipeline. Number two, right? And Russia has a right to sue him in international court. But number one, you owe us for the pipeline. Number two, you owe us for all of the damages that we have suffered as a result of not having the pipeline. So the Biden administration owes them a lot of money, and they have a right to say to the Biden administration, you owe us a lot of money. You owe us an explanation and get off our backs. But they ain't going to do it, are they? They're not going to do it. So what the German people are now going to see is the truth. What has been exposed is reality. And that is that the German government don't work for the German people. The German government will not say, let me give you a prediction. They ain't pushing back on this. They're going to say, when the Biden administration says, lies, filthy lies from the depths of hell, all lies, yeah, this is not true. You know what the German government's going to say? The same thing. When somebody says to the German government, what do you think about that, man? You guys got done dirty, and it appears that they did it intentionally with no respect for you. They're going to say, well, the Biden administration said it's all lies and fiction, so we're going with what they said. Why? Because we work for them. And if someone would say to them, well, what about the German people? Who's speaking on behalf of the German people? If in fact it is true, and it is at minimum, it's plausible, it's credible. Don't you need to look into this? Don't you need to bring Cy Hersh in? Don't you need to try to find out more? Don't you need to review this and figure out whether or not you need to seek redress? And they're going to say, no, we don't need to look into anything. Joe Biden said they didn't do it. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't do it. That means that Joe Biden said they didn't do it. And since we work for Joe Biden, when Joe Biden says they didn't do it, the evidence is irrelevant. We now know that our master's voice spoke out and said it didn't happen. So our job as the German government is to repeat our master's edict. It is now going to be officially, clearly, and demonstrated who they work for. After this, when you see, here's the thing is that will expose everything, and that is the statements or non-statements from the German government. The German government, here's what I'm going to tell you. They got two options. Option one, say Joe Biden said it's not true, and our position is it's not true. Option two, we don't have any comment. Either way, it will be rhetorically unassailable that they have acquiesced in every way to the U.S. empire, and that the people who so-called run Germany have no authority over Germany, and they don't represent the people of Germany. They represent the Joe Biden and the neocons. Rhetorically unassailable after this. And the only way they could save themselves would be come out and say this is wrong and we need to seek redress. But how could they do that in the middle of Ukraine war? Because that would be an admission that Russia ain't their enemy, wouldn't it? Well, they were told we must be scared of Russia. We must be attacked. NATO is going to protect you from Russia. This, to me, is a stake through the heart of NATO. How does the Biden administration now argue that their job, that they see their job as protecting Germany from Russia? When they're the one, we're going to attack Germany. We're going to protect Germany from an attack by Russia. And how are you going to do that? By attack, excuse me. We're going to protect Germany from an attack by Russia. And how are you going to do that? We're going to attack Germany to ensure that we maintain military and economic dominance over Germany and the rest of of Europe. It is now clear that they don't have Europe's security or Europe's best interest economically in mind in any way, shape, or form. It is now clear that Europe is a prisoner of the U.S. They're vassals. They're prisoners. They are prisoners of a brutal, vicious regime who will use coercive measures up to and including military attacks to maintain their dominance over Europe. Europe is finished, over, done. The only question is this: how long will the people of Europe continue to go along with this charade that the leaders of their countries are representing them, that the leaders of their countries represent independence or sovereignty, that somehow they put these people in power? They couldn't have put them in power. They didn't elect them. That's not the way it works, because if they put them in power and elected them, they would have some level of accountability to the people. When your government is complicit in military attacks on your country, they ain't your government. Don't fool yourself. To say that these people are traitors would be just to have a firm grasp of the obvious. So if the European people now, if the German people, what are they going to do? Are they going to be still flying their blue and yellow flags? Yeah. What are you going to do now that you've found out that the United States launched a military attack on you? We're going to continue to pretend as though we're afraid of a military attack from Russia. We're going to think about this Stockholm syndrome. You are now going to pretend that the people who launched a military attack on you are your allies. You are an embarrassment. Germany, France, Italy, they cut all of your stuff off. They did this to cut the Nord Stream 2 flow to Europe. They attacked you. And now your governments are going to pretend that your captors, that your kidnappers, that your oppressors are your allies? Oh, for God's sake, you people embarrass me. You embarrass me as human beings. Look at who has guts? I gotta say, who's got guts? Iran, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, Russia, China. The adversaries of the U.S. admit that they're adversaries of the U.S. They say, nah, we're not on their side. We're adversaries. And the U.S. goes after them, right? They've got an honest relationship with the U.S. They say, we oppose the U.S. empire and the U.S. imperialism, and the U.S. can come after us. All they want to, we ain't giving in. You have to respect them. Whatever you think of any of those countries, it's none of my business. But you got to admit they're independent and they're sovereign, and they're admitting I'll put it like this: they seem to know who their allies are and who their adversaries are, don't they? Now we've got Europe, a pathetic group of vassals that they're calling leaders. And now it is clear and obvious that they have been attacked by the U.S. empire, and they're going to have to pretend that they don't know that the U.S. empire attacked them. The veil is off. The veneer of independence and sovereignty and integrity has been lifted, and not a moment too soon, from Europe. This is pretty sad right now. And the Biden administration has put Europe in the position of being the laughing stock of the world. So now, oh yes, they're going to join in. Let's all go join in what? And go after China. Why? Because China is threatening our order. Let me ask you this. Does this sound like a rules-based order? Doesn't Biden always say the rules-based order, democracy versus an authoritarianism? Is that democracy or authoritarianism? If you blow the hell up out of the infrastructure of an ally, is that democracy or authoritarianism? Tell me what it is. It is. Now, did you go meet with the Germans in a democratic way? Did you vote on what was going to happen? Can anyone deny that it's an authoritarian act to launch a brutal and vicious attack against Germany and tell them it's your allies? And now what are you going to say? We're opposed to Russia. Why? Because they launched an attack on Ukraine and you launched an attack on Germany. And technically, let me add this. It will expose something else about NATO, that it's a total and complete fraud. Because what does that mean? The United States says we're going to launch a military attack on Germany and we're going to hide it. But they're not able to hide it and it comes out, which means it triggers Article 5. It triggers Article 5. Now, right? That means that NATO countries have to come together and say, one of us has been attacked. Do we all need to come together to attack the aggressor? But wait a minute. The aggressor is a member of NATO. In fact, the aggressor is NATO. There is no NATO. The United States doesn't have allies. There's no such thing as NATO. It is an umbrella organization, and the United States hold that organization together not with a discussion, not with a partnership. They use the whip. They use coercive means. They use violence, and they are using violence. So now we know if someone says to you, what holds NATO together? The answer is the United States' willingness to use violence against other members of NATO. That's the only thing that holds it together. Because the US saw their dominance over Europe fading, which would mean that NATO is fading and coming apart, and they need to hold it together. And what did they decide to do to hold it together? To use violence. So what holds NATO together? Violence. US violence. The cat's out of the bag. And now what are they going to do? We didn't do it. Yeah, it sounds good. But to me, at this point, if you read the article, the level of specificity here and the fact that Seymour Hersh's record is unimpeachable. We're not talking about, like I said, we're not talking about Schmucky the Clown here on YouTube, who does a YouTube stream, a show here and there where he runs off at the mouth. We ain't talking about me. If I just came out and said it, you could be, oh, it's Garland Nixon, for God's sake, who believes this guy? He's, he tells a lot of jokes and has a lot of fun, and I like watching his stream. But let's face it, he has no record. I don't know who this guy is. He could be a liar, a cheat, and a fraud. It's true. You don't know me. You listen to what I say, and you like it or you don't like it, whatever. But this is Seymour Hersh. This is a man with an unimpeachable record of investigative journalism, and with a history of deep contacts in the Pentagon, saying, I got sources, and my sources have direct knowledge. And this is what they tell me. At a time, if you put it together, where the Ukraine conflict is coming unraveled. And where, as that comes unraveled, the neocons are putting together a mad and insane plan to go to war with China. That they are out of control. They don't know what to do in the Ukraine conflict. They're trying to escalate. The things have fallen apart. They're about to lose, completely lose. That Europe's economy is collapsing. The U.S. economy ain't all that much better, but it's not in total free fall like, say, the UK. Free fall. And the neocons have no off-ramp, no way. They don't know what to do. They won't even accept reality. They won't even look at what's happening. Instead, it's like, yeah, the Russians are going to lose, still going to lose. Yeah, at any moment now, they're going to, the Ukrainians are going to overrun all the Russian positions. They can't even accept reality. I think the Pentagon has said to them, now keep in mind something. In the last couple of weeks, yes, we're going to send them Patriot missiles. You heard anything about the Patriot missiles lately? I suspect the Pentagon said, why do we want to send a Patriot missile battery over there to get blown to hell? Because as soon as we turn it on, the Russians are going to blow it up. They can't wait to brag. Yeah, let's send the neocons, or we need to send lots of M1 tanks. And the Pentagon's like, well, they don't have any air cover. They have no way to protect them. And they already had 2,000 tanks. So they lost all of them. You know what they're going to do? They're going to capture an M1 tank. They're probably going to buy it from that corrupt government in Ukraine. No doubt. As soon as it lands, some corrupt leaders in Ukraine are going to say to the Russians, hey, got a tank. If the price is right, you got a tank. And the Russians are going to be, what do you want for it? Give me $1 million. And the Russians will probably say, I'll give you $1.1 million if you give it fully and totally intact, just like new. And they're going to be like, we'll take it. And boom, the Russians are going to have whatever you give them. The Russians are going to have it. They're going to get, it's going to hit the skids. It ain't even ever going to make it to the battlefield. I guarantee you, some of them are going right straight to the Russian tank factory to be taken apart by the Russians so they can look for any weakness in it they can find. They're going to drill that thing from one end to the other, and and we all know that. That's what's been happening. Well, the rumors had gone around that when HIMARS went there, one of the very first ones got sold to the Russians for like 300 or 800,000 sold. And the Russians got a HIMARS that they've like been displaying. So the Pentagon's like, we don't have that much stuff, dude, and you're getting rid of our stuff and you're giving it. They're not happy. They're not happy. And I think they finally, the neocons took it too far. And now here we are. All right, so we're going to start by doing this. Before I go, I will go. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to check out. Wow, we got a lot of people here. And I've got to look for super chats because I always try to answer my super chats as best I can. I'm sorry if I miss one. Bruce Moore says, thank you, Garland. And listen through the super chats because we get a lot of good questions and I answer them. I answer them. We get a lot of great questions. So I noticed we got smart people here doing super chats. And so, alrighty. Thanks, Margarita Dubrovina. Let's keep going. I'm going to guarantee we're going to get some questions and you're going to be happy that I asked. Here's a question. Let's go. Alina K says, after 16 years in Norway, I can say it's an Anglo-Saxon's vassals. USA opened 2 military bases here recently. They're sending $7.5 billion USD to Ukraine. Meanwhile, common people are struggling. State is rich, but not the people. There you go. Norway, and you know why? Because that's neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is the state is rich and not the people. Neoliberalism is a self-serving racket for the rich, where you take money from the poor. It's Robin Hood in reverse. You take money from the working class and the poor and you give it to the rich. G-Dog says, if Cy Hersh said it, bank it. This man is in a class with Julian Assange and Ed Snowden. That's what I'm saying. First of all, consider the source. It's coming from Cy Hersh and it's intricately detailed. It's not a lie. Jay Larson, thanks a lot, Jay. That's it. If it came from Cy Hersh, bank it, brother. Bank it. Bank it. And because of his history of contacts with the Pentagon, you can say it probably came from the Pentagon. All right, let's go. Knicker Twist Copperby says, write up the Aris, please. Man in Greece. Thanks a lot, man in Greece. Anything else? I think that's it. Gritty from the UK. Hello from San Francisco. Wow, that's cool. So that's where we are, guys and girls and peoples. Everybody says, you know, people are agreeing with me here. They're looking at it saying it's from Cy Hersh. Let me just, for those of you who want to know where to find it, let me show you this. It's critical. There you go. Look at it. Seymour Hersh, How America Took Out the Nord Stream Pipeline. The New York Times called it a mystery, but the United States executed a covert sea operation that was kept secret until now. You're talking about Cy Hersh. This guy is not saying this is what I think happened. He's not saying I wonder if this happened. He's saying the cat's out of the bag, guys. Here's what happened. So now Germany, man, let's see what Sparky says. If Abrams tanks ever reach Ukraine, they likely BR the plane Jane export model. They'll likely be the plain Jane export model. Yeah. Oh, yeah. But they're never getting there. They're never getting there because everybody knows you know, what's going to happen to them when they get there, that the Russians are going to nab them right up. Any comments? Yeah, so what we got is what I would call a turning point. We got a real turning point here. We got a point where the cat is out of the bag in Europe, and the Europeans are in a position where and here's the issue. The European leaders now are exposed. What do they do? Well, I'm going to tell you what they do. Let's not guess. And let's not guess. They do the only thing they can do. They kiss up to the Biden administration. This will be revealed. Anybody, come on. Everybody's looking at that. And this is going to happen. And people are going to look and say, holy crap, did you see that story? And then Macron and the leaders of Italy and Germany and all are going to be over there. They're going to be, holy mother of God, did you see that story? And they're going to look over slowly at Macron and Schultz et al. And they're going to cross their arms. And they're going to say, my God, what are you going to do? And Macron and the leaders of Italy and everywhere else are going to weigh their options, and they're going to say, whatever Biden tells us to do, because we don't work for you people. We work for them. And at that point, see, this is an inflection point. This is an interesting point for the people of Europe, because here's the question. What do you do when you find out about the illusion, right? What do you do when you find out you're in the matrix? What do you do when you realize that everything you believed was a lie? When you believed that you voted Macron or Olaf Scholz in, right? Or Bologna or whatever her name is, Maloney, whatever her name is in Italy. What do you do when you believe in your heart that you voted them in? And you vote, and that you had some input, and that you have some input, and that if you put enough pressure on your leaders, they'll have to act, and that you have a country. What do you do when you find out it's all a lie? What do you do when you find out your country was attacked? And what you've been told is we have to act to protect ourselves, to maintain our sovereignty and diplomacy. That's why you're suffering. That's why you've got to be cold and turn your lights out and ride a bicycle to work in the wintertime so that we can protect democracy, because the evil Putin is over there is going to attack our democracy, and he's going to attack our country, and we must be protected from him. What do you do when you find out it's all a lie? When you find out that your country was attacked, and you find out and you look at your government, and you say to your government, oh my God, we've been attacked. And your government says, it's time to come clean. We've been perpetrating a fraud on you for a long, long time. We've been pretending that you voted and chose that your parliament. And remember a couple months back when Annalena Baerbock said, we don't care what the German voters are going to do. We're going to support Ukraine. Yeah. Well, you should have learned something from that, people. She was telling the truth. We really aren't into you. We don't care what you say. We don't care how you say it. There's no way out of this, German people. When the Americans call and they say, I want you to cut their benefits, we're cutting your benefits. When the Americans call and say, that's a nice industry you got there, we want it. We will facilitate your jobs leaving this country. We will facilitate your industry being wiped out. We will facilitate the end of everything, the end of your style of life, the end of your culture, the end of everything. When Biden calls and says, do it, you don't have any say in this matter. And quite frankly, neither do we. We're not really leaders of this country. We're facilitators. We are conduits for the power of the U.S. empire. The power of the U.S. empire passes through us to you. Bad news. That fake that you believe, that fraud. The good news is you don't have to believe it anymore. It's done. My name is Garland Nixon. Thank you, everybody. Here's what you should do if you can. Number one, rockfin.com. Make sure that when and if they throw me off of YouTube, you're following me on Rockfin. It's free. It's a free speech platform, and it doesn't have any advertisements. How sweet is that? You can watch it, unlike YouTube, no advertisements. Watch it. I always say, and they're not going to sanction. For all I know, they may close this video down, but they won't do it on Rockfin. So watch me, rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. Additionally, follow me on Telegram in case they throw me off everywhere else. I've got a Patreon page. If you go on patreon.com, if you can do $5 or $10 or $100 a month, whatever you can do to help the channel is highly appreciated. PayPal is there. If you don't like PayPal, good old buymeacoffee.com/Garland NH is an option, and Cash App. Last thing I'll say about Rockfin, I love my Rockfin for this reason. It's a free speech platform first and foremost, and it doesn't have advertisements second and foremost. However, there is an option for those who can afford it. The way you ask, well, if they don't sell advertising, how do they stay in money? Subscribers. You can become a subscriber on Rockfin. It's $14.99 a month, but if you sign up for a year, it's only $9.99 a month because they knock off a couple of months and it comes down to $9.99 a month. So you can go to rockfin.com and become a subscriber. You say, is there any benefit to that? Yes. One day, also all content creators, always 1 week. At least one show per week we do for subscribers only. Mine generally is every Wednesday from 9 to 10 a.m. with Scott Ritter. However, I couldn't make it this Wednesday. So Friday from 9 to 10 a.m. on Rockfin, and will be my subscriber only show with Scott Ritter. And with all that's going on now with this and with what's happening on the contact line in Ukraine, it is going to be very interesting to get Scott Ritter's input. Thanks a lot, everybody. Let me see. Did I miss? I think I might have missed a super chat. Let's see what Andy Scott News says. Hello from, I guess that's Norway. So far silent on the Hersh story. Yeah, I can't imagine why. I cannot imagine why they'd be silent. Did I miss anything? We got Sparky. Did we miss anybody else on Rockfin? I don't think we did. I don't think we missed anybody on Rockfin. All right, everybody, share this on all your social media platforms if you can. Thanks. Peace. I'm out.